Hi everyone. We're continuing on with section 7 here, and we are taking a look at growth hormone and how it's regulated, and we're also going to take a look at effects. So this is one that we're going to get into a little bit more as opposed to other ones where I said, don't worry about that. We're going to talk about it a little bit more later. We don't really talk much more about this, so let's talk about it now. Remember that growth hormone is going to be regulated by that hormonal stimulation. What causes the anterior pituitary to secrete growth hormone is going to be the hypothalamus regulating hormones, GHRH and GHIH. So let's talk about, well, what even causes the hypothalamus to secrete GRH? There's got to be something that stimulates the hypothalamus to secrete it, right? So there's a couple of things, or 4 things. A person's age, time of day, nutrient levels, stress, and exercise are all going to be things that stimulate the hypothalamus to secrete GHRH. Let's take a look at it. As, of course, most people know when growth happens the most. Look at that right there. It starts to dip right at your 20s, not as much so. So most growth is going to be children, and adolescence is going to be where you have the most growth hormone that's going to be released. Another thing that influences is going to be sleep right there. So it kind of corresponds to that. It says peak GH levels correspond to early stages of normal sleep cycle. So there's that. Another thing is nutrient levels. So it can respond to glucose levels and amino acid levels as well. And lastly, stress can cause an increase in growth hormones. Emotional stress, physical stress, like if you have surgery, then it can actually go in and increase growth hormone. If you think about it, that's kind of what you want when you're having surgeries. You would like to have some growth hormone so it can go in and kind of help repair and grow some of those tissues that might have been damaged. Interesting right there, although severe emotional stress can cause a decrease in growth hormone in children. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe not. All right, let's take a look at the whole negative feedback loop right here. So this is going in and looking at, what's stimulating these to be released, and then how is it regulated. So there's a stimulus from the hypothalamus. It is going to be various stimuli that we had just mentioned. So once GHRH is secreted, then it goes and tells the anterior pituitary to secrete growth hormone. And remember, growth hormone has a few targets. One of the targets is the liver, and it tells the liver to secrete that insulin-like growth factor. An insulin-like growth factor is going to be, it mimics growth hormone. It goes in and helps growth hormone to do all of these different effects right here. So they act synergistically. So let's take a look at some of them. Again, another thing that it does for the liver is it is going to cause something called glycogenolysis. Think about what this term means. Lysis means breakdown of glycogen. If you think about what glycogen is, it's just a whole bunch of glucose molecules. Remember, this glycogen is your storage, your glucose storage. So the liver is going to go in and break down glycogen, and it's going to pump glucose into the bloodstream. We're going to talk about why it does that in a second. It also goes in and increases lipolysis, breakdown of lipids, and it throws fatty acids and glycerol. What this does is it also provides fuel in the bloodstream as well. I'm sure you're thinking, well, why do we need fuel in the bloodstream? Think about what's happening in the bone, muscle, cartilage cell. They are going in and they are increasing their growth. They are increasing mitosis. Decreasing apoptosis. But in order to build things, you need lots of ATP, right? Remember, some of the key factors for ATP production is fuel, is glucose, and you can use other fuel sources. And that's why glucose is being thrown into the bloodstream. That's why glycerol and fatty acids are being thrown into the bloodstream. So this can help fuel all of the growth that is going on in bones and muscles and cartilage and a lot of cells in the body. It does it by taking out the amino acids that are floating around in the bloodstream, because if you want to build muscle protein, think about what protein synthesis, proteins are made of amino acids. So you've got to have that in order for all of this to be done. So it makes sense, right? So that's about it on this one. It talks about increased levels of both growth hormone and the IGF inhibit the release of GHRH. So that's going to be one thing that inhibits it from being secreted. And that's your nice little negative feedback loop. So let's take a look and see what happens when these hormones are being secreted maybe too much or not enough. So remember, hormones have to be closely regulated. If they're not, then you do get these endocrine disorders that are going to happen because either hypersecretion of the hormone is going to affect a person, which means too much is being secreted, or hyposecretion is going to occur. So let's take a look at a couple of things that can happen with the growth hormone if there's being hyper or hyposecretion. So pituitary dwarfism is going to occur with hyposecretion. So not enough growth hormone is going to be secreted, and it can be from tumors on the pituitary or the hypothalamus. It can be some other problem with the pituitary or the hypothalamus. Usually what happens is the individual is short in stature and low blood sugar. So don't get this confused with the achondroplasia, achondroplastic dwarfism. This one's pituitary dwarfism. Let's take a look at the opposite that is going to happen. We're going to take a look at two conditions that occur because of hypersecretion of growth hormone. We're going to take a look at one that happens early in life and then one that might happen if growth hormone is being hypersecreted later in life. So pituitary gigantism is going to occur when there's too much growth hormone being secreted before the epiphyseal plates have closed, before those growth plates have closed. Because if you think about it, growth plates are still very, very active. Lots of chondrocytes that are being proliferated, which means that more bone is going to, of course, build, so they get taller and taller and taller. So you have an excess growth. You also have an increase in blood sugar because remember, another thing that growth hormone does is it pops out a whole bunch of glucose into the bloodstream. Usually individuals have larger internal organs, specifically the heart. If you think about it, it has to pump so much more to get to all of the different organs. And then that can lead to death at an early age. So this is showing gigantism here. Let's take a look at what happens when, for some reason, maybe the pituitary or there's a problem with the hypothalamus, maybe there's a tumor on the pituitary gland, but later in life, once the epiphyseal plates have closed, this is called acromegaly. This is going to be excessive growth hormone production in an adult. So if the plates close, the bones aren't going to get longer anymore, right? But they can still get thicker and rounder. So individuals that have acromegaly, they are going to have an enlargement of the bones in the face, the hands, the feet. So as you can see, this is actually the same individual throughout her entire lifetime. You can kind of see it starting to, the lantern jaw kind of setting in and the nose increasing. Look at her fingers are getting longer as well. So that's what happens with acromegaly and whenever an adult secretes too much growth hormone. Again, increased release of glucose because that's one of the effects of the growth hormone. You still have an increase in the organ size as well. So usually if it is because of a tumor, if the tumor is taken out, then it will stop any more enlargement. But unfortunately, can't really do much about what has already happened as far as the growth of the bones. So that's it for our hypothalamus and pituitary gland. The next thing that we're going to take a look at, the next video, is going to be over the thyroid gland. So until then.